Africa Rise and Shine on the 2nd of June as we take a look at the economics and business stories in the continent. And we speak to Dr. Eddie Mahembe, who is a development economist. Dr. Mahembe, how are you on this Monday?
I'm very well. Thank you for the opportunity, Asanda.
Thank you for making time for us. And making this important analysis as far as economics are concerned. Let's start with South Africa. And the country is considering quotas for foreign nationals in the labor market, quotas on the number of foreign nationals that can be part of various sectors. What do these quotas actually aim to do?
I had some look into it, and I've also listened to some of the discussions, with the Department of Labor and others. I think what they're trying to do is I think it's based on issue where there is a concern, rightfully so, that many South Africans are excluded from the labor market, and there is too much competition over few jobs. And from there, then the idea is to say, how can we try to cushion the locals from that kind of competition so that they can also get opportunities. But eventually, there are two things which comes into play. The first one would be, firstly, how do you also make sure that even the locals are also competent enough to take those jobs and be able to do forward? But the second part again is also to say, during that transition, if we do quotas, are we not also creating issues to do with lack of competition, which might also lead to inefficiencies? But eventually, at the end of the day, locals are supposed to benefit. I think that's a given. And in almost all countries, if there is a situation where the locals seems to be excluded from the economic opportunities, almost every country would also try to see how best to incorporate the issue of locals in the labor market.
All right, so in terms of how common this is worldwide, how common is imposing quotas from a worldwide perspective?
I think it's almost common almost everywhere. I think if somebody looks at BRICS, for example, one of the issues why there to be BRICS, and then people from Britain by that time were actually concerned that other European countries are flocking into Britain and taking work for the locals. I've seen it in almost every country. You might find that in some instances they also limit to say you shouldn't have foreigners invest in this sector, and also to leave some sectors where they say there is local content or local people are only allowed to invest in, especially in telecommunications and so forth. So it's really common, but in some instances it's settled. But in some instances where the economy is doing very well, they actually encourage foreigners. So usually it always sort of happens when the economy is not doing well and when opportunities are fewer, and that's normally what happens.
Government in South Africa has admitted that getting an exact figure of migrants in the country is information that is difficult to access or come by. So is there reliable statistical evidence to have such quotas implemented successfully?
I think very, very important observation there, because usually you can't manage what you cannot measure. Yeah. So I think the most important first step is to try to measure. And then once you are able to measure, then you are able to manage. So if it's difficult to get or to have a figure, then it might be, the policy might be based on an assumption. And even after debating the parliament, then the policies in place, you might find that quota, let's say for argument's sake, maybe you can put a quota of 15%. But then after doing that, you discover that it was actually 5%. So that quota becomes useless. So it's very important to really get the figures right. It is possible these days. It's possible to get the figures right. And once we have those kind of figures, for example, I know almost every business, or especially the formal businesses, are registered with the sitters. They do business with sitters. So it's possible to also get a gauge of how many are locals and how many are foreigners, if they are foreigners, where. So it's really possible. It's a lot of work, yes, but it's possible to be able to get a figure. And then once the figure is there, it's very easier to make a policy based on something measurable rather than perception.
Let's move to Ghana now, Doctor, where the Labour Export Program there has been announced by the President, John Mahama. What is the aim of this program?
I have seen it's almost similar to what Malawi did some few years back, where they tried to export labor to Israel, I think in the agricultural sector. And I see that the same with Ghana. They've come up with a Ghana labor export program, and they are aiming to export to what they say countries which are willing to take their labor, especially electricians, your boiler makers, mostly trades. The aim is definitely to ease unemployment in Ghana. I think that's one issue. Then the second one also, I think they would actually argue that it is also to try to see whether we can get skills. So by sending people out, maybe they will be exposed to skills, and then they will come back, because the way it's structured is such a way that it's a contract basis. I mean, for a year or so that you work and then maybe come back. So it's a two-edged sword in the sense that you want to ease unemployment, but also you also want to make sure that you expose your people to that. But one of the issues which always people would talk about when you do something like that, said when you campaign to be in office, where you campaigning so that you can send people out, or you campaign so that you can create jobs. But one thing which is for sure is that unemployment is a very, very serious issue, especially of the youth in Africa at large. I think you would know, even in South Africa, we have that group which we normally call needs, not in employment, not in education, and not in training. So it's across the board. So instead of having them, in my view, instead of having youths going through the Mediterranean Sea, sinking and so forth, if a country can actually come up with a program which is supportable, and where people can travel safely and also be able to be treated well in terms of human rights, then I think it's a step in the right direction. Though we would also want these skills to benefit Africa at the end of the day.
Are there specific sectors or specific professionals that will be targeted by this program?
Yes, they are mainly focusing on trades. That's your electricians, your boiler makers, your people in agriculture, and so forth. So it's almost like your professionals in terms of trades, but also low-skilled workers in terms of agriculture and so forth. That's their main target.
All right, let's move to Nigeria now. The Labour Congress is alleging that President Tinubu's reforms have brought more suffering for the Nigerian people. And first, maybe let's start on what formed part of these economic reforms, which have been labeled as bold.
Yeah, his main target has been we want to reform, but his main reform agenda was to try to see how to make Nigeria more market friendly, more business friendly, especially around removing subsidies. And that's the core issue actually on the agenda now, where people are arguing that when he removed subsidies, especially fuel subsidy, then it led to fuel become more expensive, and people are saying no, it's more expensive, but we are producers of fuel. Secondly, by removing those subsidies again, it means people are now paying more. So there is a very, very worrying trend of the higher cost of living. And it's really an issue. And that's why a lot of people are complaining that, yes, reforms, but these reforms are hitting our pockets, and these reforms are actually making our economy worse off. So yes, there is what I call opposition pushback, especially on these policies.
What is the response of trade unions to these complaints, and how have they viewed these reforms in the first place in terms of their take on it?
Yes, I've looked at some of the responses from the trade union. The trade union are sort of on the side of the opposition in this case, but their main focus is actually the cost of living. That's why the trade union, the cost of living, to say the cost of living is getting high, and our people their take home is getting eroded. And I see that this is going to continue, because I don't see the government backing down on it. So we might likely going to see a developing trend where there will be a clash between labor on one hand, opposition on the other, but trying to squeeze the government so that they can be able to relent on some of these policies, especially on subsidies. I just want to remind the viewers that subsidies in Nigeria has been a very thorny issue for a long time, because the argument has always been, why do we subsidize? If we subsidize, it means we are paying from the physicals. And then if we remove subsidy again, we are also not cushioning the poor. So there is always that debate on how do we manage issue to do with how do we cushion the poor against the harsh cost of living.
Yeah. Let's move to Zimbabwe now. The Renewable Energy Investment Platform has received support from the European Union and Germany, and this prioritizes solar energy. Why the focus on solar?
I think what Zimbabwe has done, just to give some viewers perspective, is that they've come up with some reforms in the energy sector, and in the energy sector they've allowed also private players to produce energy, and we have also seen that it has also happened in South Africa, for example, where there's an opening up of the energy sector. So Zimbabwe has done that, and we have seen that there is a lot of uptake or interest from different players, especially from EU, Germany, even Sweden, I think. So there's a lot of interest in that sector. And what the reason why people sort of got into solar and other sort of renewable kind of energy is that coal in Zimbabwe, it has been one of the main sources of energy for some time, but it's actually depleted in Wange area there. It's actually being depleted. So, but energy is a very big requirement for industrialization, manufacturing, and so there is always that gap where energy is needed. So when one comes and is able to take advantage of the sun, because Zimbabwe is generally sunny compared to many European countries, generally sunny. So if somebody is able to get solar energy and be able to distribute using actually the infrastructure already there by the ZESA, the electricity company there. So I see that there is that interest because one, there is demand. Definitely there is demand. Secondly, the government has opened up. And thirdly, there is also an opportunity because solar energy is abundant.
Well, let's leave it there for now, Doctor, for this Economics Monday. Thank you so much again for your insights and valuable analysis.
Thank you, and God bless.
You too. God bless you too. Dr. Eddie Mahembe is a development economist chatting to us as part of our Economics Monday feature, where we look at some economics and business stories in the continent. The Alliance of Sahel States creating a regional bank, and whether we can expect a Sahel currency was going to be my last question, but then I ran out of time completely. I don't know how this is going to make ECOWAS look. They tried it and it didn't seem to materialize.
I think the Sahel state thing is not going to have legs eventually. I think it's interesting right now, but the region itself needs each other. The three on their own, it's not going to be enough. They'll come to realize that. That's my prediction as Peter Ndoro, development economist.
Economic analyst and researcher / presenter and producer.
They'll come right, I promise you.
All right, as we enter the next and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine, we say good morning to you. My name is Asanda Beda with, of course, Peter Ndoro. We're going to get into the show in just a bit in terms of this hour. I think let's just go straight to news now. Here's Onele Nzinzi with our news bulletin, and then Misubudi Makura will follow her with sports headlines.